Well, there you have it, Matt Waldman. The 2025 NFL Draft is in the books. It was very exciting, unless you're Shedeur Sanders. We'll talk about him later in the draft. It's very exciting for people like me, though, and you, who play the fantasy football, because it's kind of the green flag, in my estimation, of the season, right? Like, I've been out there drafting for the last 2 months, blindly, stupidly. Now I can look and see how many of my shares are totally worth.
Well, wait a minute. Semi-stupidly.
Semi-stupidly, right?
Yes.
Like, well, yeah, like just working the muscles, working the draft muscles. But the thing that I'm waiting for in my mail, I got an email last night. When is the rookie scouting portfolio post-draft edition coming to me?
Probably will be no later than Saturday morning. But I would say it'll probably be there earlier, because it tends to be. Right now, I've ranked probably the top 150. I've got 250 that are going to be on the cheat sheet. So I've got a lot to do right now. But for those of you who purchased after Sunday night, at least tonight, I will email the same prelim top 55 to those who bought after Sunday night. But probably starting tomorrow, if you bought it and you're like, hey, can I get the top 55? I'm probably gonna be like, not answering you at all, and I will probably just be emailing everything on Saturday. So if you're late, you're shit out of luck for the prelim top 55. Sorry about that, but I gotta make sure that I get this thing done. And I can't do all the emailing, but I will do that. I will try to do that at least once.
Write myself a note. I got to pay for Dempsey's.
Dempsey's waiting for me to pay him so that you can pay for
I'll pay you so that we can start our draft.
That's what he's doing. But I'm waiting because I don't want to start our draft right now. So you can, because I would like to get through the work I'm doing. So I'm going to be the one holding up this league. But anyway, I'm that pain in the ass. I'm Matt Waldman. If you haven't heard, this is the Rookie Scouting Portfolio podcast to Feel It or Fuck It. And I hold up leagues because of all y'all, thankfully.
And I'm very good at introducing the people on the podcast I'm doing. So
we already know who we are, right? Do we?
I know who we are. I don't know. I think most people. But if you just show it up here at Football Diehard, at Matt Waldman on both the X and the Blue Ski. Find our works also respectively at Football Guys. But go to mattwaldman.com right now and order up your RSP if you don't have it. The pre-draft version, the massive tome that's super useful over the course of many years for me is available, and that's part of the purchase. And then you get the post-draft edition and all the additional goodies, and you can buy more too if you're a Dynasty player. And check that out as well.
Well, enough of the silliness.
I don't know if I'm done with the silliness.
You're not? Keep going.
I actually was. Well, no, it's going to get sillier. Isaiah Neyor didn't produce a lot in college. 87 catches in 5 seasons, which probably explains why he went undrafted. Yet the San Francisco 49ers felt like he was somebody worth signing. Is he a sleeper? Feel it or fuck it?
Yes, in the sense of if you're in a deeper league in the way that Bob and I and Mike Dempsey play fantasy football, where you've got 50 roster spots, it feels like, or somewhere in the 40 to 50 roster range, Isaiah Neyor is someone to watch because, one, the 49ers, they got rid of Debo. They've got Ricky Pearsall, and they certainly have Brandon Ayuk, but they don't really have a true X like Neyor can be. And Neyor was terrific out of Wyoming, then got transferred to Texas, and he and Xavier Worthy were supposed to be Steve Sarkisian's 1-2 punch that was going to light up the SEC, and then he tore his ACL. And he's been at Nebraska for, I think, the past year, a little bit longer than that, and he played really well last year. Wasn't sure about coming out or not, but he ran a 4.440 at 6'4", 218. Good hands, good tracking ability. One of the true X's, and I just think that, he's one of those guys that maybe slipped through the cracks. And, as long as there are any major character type of issues, and I haven't heard anything at this point, he's someone you're going to want to pay attention to in camp, even if you're not remotely drafting him based on the fact that you're in a smaller league or you're even in a larger league and waiting from there. So
you had me at big and fast. Especially, when you have a receiving core that, like, I think there's a lot of questions there. I mean, I did a draft yesterday, post-draft on Sirius. You can go find that on your app. And it was weird because I felt like the 49ers receivers went in reverse order. It was Ayuk went first, Ricky Pearsall went second, and Juwan Jennings went third. To me, Juwan Jennings is the clear-cut wide receiver one there until further notice. And maybe Ayuk recovers from his ACL, but it was later in the year. But there's room here for somebody to climb up the depth chart. Also, Jordan Mason is no longer on the roster. He has gone on to a new team, the Minnesota Vikings. Jordan James is on the roster now, as they added him in the 5th round, running back out of Oregon. What do you think of him? Is he going to be an underrated prospect? Does he have a chance to climb up? Isaiah Guerrero right now behind Christian McCaffrey. Is James a guy that we should pay attention to?
Absolutely, because James is one of those players who, while he isn't explosive, he'll flip the field for you, but he's not a breakaway back. So he's got the speed for the NFL, but he's more of a quick accelerator who gets up to top speed in a hurry and is very shifty. And he's also an extremely smart all-around player. Whereas Guerrero has got the power, he's got the speed. He generally has a pretty good working compass for how to get through navigate the tackles. But I would say that he's a little more up and down of a player than what James is. And listening to Kyle Shanahan and company talk about James, I think they really were impressed with how hard he ran for a guy who's just kind of average size for a starter. That he's a tackle breaker, that he's shifty, and he can pass block, he can catch. He's a good all-around back. He fits more of like what Jordan Mason could do, and then Christian McCaffrey in front of him. Right. But he's that guy that if the Guerrero train falls apart pretty quickly, which there's a possibility it does, Jordan James could be the guy, because they were really surprised. They were like, we knew we could wait this year for a back, and knowing that it was a strong class, and we were pleasantly surprised that we wound up with James. So I would definitely be keeping an eye on him late in redrafts, and he's an absolute guy you want in rookie drafts where you have at least 7 rounds.
Yeah, he kind of became a buzzy name, seemed like late in the draft process. I've heard Todd McShay and Daniel Jeremiah talking about him at one point, and just seemed like people wanted to, when you start hearing, the personalities out there start saying names, they just try to, on the off chance it makes them look smart, right? Like, I'm not saying they don't like this guy, but there's a reason they're putting the name out there just before the draft. They want people to remember and associate that name with them. So I think it's always interesting when I see these guys that kind of get that late pre-draft buzz.
It's funny because he's in a mix of players I really like Breshard Smith, we'll talk Travis Etienne, Woody Marks. These are all players that people go scat backs who might be able to do a little bit more and in a good fit, and they improve maybe one area. They could be that lead back that people seem to want to make DeAndre Swift, and then a year later don't want to. But these guys are all capable of being as good or better than that conceptually. And James was the guy with the same score as all those guys are in there, who was probably the least mentioned, but maybe just the savviest runner of all of them.
Right. We had talked about this, though, the entirety period leading up the draft. There's a lot of guys in kind of the same general vicinity, and all it's going to take is the right set of circumstances that allow one of these guys to rise up. And so we should be watching all of them. I totally agree with this. And San Francisco has kind of been a breeding ground for these type of players, right? So we'll see how that goes. Another thing, San Francisco, I have it on good authority. Sources tell me late round quarterback is their thing. As they negotiate a $50 million a year extension with Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, a couple of years ago. They grabbed in the 7th round Kurtis Rourke out of Indiana. He's a big boy. Tell us more.
Yeah, I love Kurtis Rourke. He was my number 4 quarterback in the RSP pre-draft. And obviously Emperor Palpatine has similar taste over up in the skybox there, lording over his son Kyle. But, you look at Rourke, and what you see is a well-built passer with a good enough arm, much in the way of Brock Purdy's arm. It's good. It's not great. Good enough to start. He can throw accurately downfield to the opposite boundary. He has good pocket feel and movement. He's not as mobile as guys like even Purdy, who's surprisingly mobile. He's more in that Tom Brady, Matt Ryan kind of pocket feel where you're going to get away from people, you're going to avoid pressure, but you're not. If you get 10 yards downfield, that's a big play run for those guys. It's the same thing for Rourke, at least from what I saw the past couple of years. The thing is, you got to remember that he played on a partially torn ACL most of the year last year, and most people didn't realize that. And it's the same ACL that he injured a few years back. So, people worry about the knee, but the way I look at it is if the 49ers drafted him in the 7th round rather than trying to negotiate a contract with him as a UDFA, they valued him as a guy they can anticipate. And they probably saw the medicals and said, and this is what they said, redshirt year, and then we'll let him compete next year. And we like what we see out of him. We feel like he's a very good, accomplished quarterback who really understands the game. And, from that standpoint, the way he played on a torn ACL and that toughness, as Gene Bramall told me, if it's just an ACL tear, no other accompanying issues with meniscus or other tendons or ligaments, it's a long recovery, but it's not one where the knee isn't the same. The knee actually will be the same as it was pre-injury, even if you've torn it multiple times. So I think that's what they're probably getting when they drafted him in the 7th round. And to me, in a weak quarterback class, Kurtis Rourke is that guy that there's only 2 guys I would draft in this class if I were pretending to be an NFL GM. One of them is Jalen Milroe, because you're going to get him at a deal, and everybody underestimated him. And the other was Kurtis Rourke late. So to me, the NFC West was pretty smart this year.
Like, I agree with you on Milroe. For me, Milroe was a guy I was trying to get in a dynasty draft. We draft before the draft. I missed out on him. I ended up with Tyler Shough. We'll talk about him too. I feel like I got a fortuitous landing spot. But Milroe to me is the guy that like if you're an NFL team and you just watch the Washington Commanders turn their entire franchise around, literally the entire fortunes of their franchise with a quarterback pick and a head coach, and the quarterback being a super athletic guy who runs. And I saw Jalen Milroe, and I said, man, if I could teach this guy to throw, that would be worth an investment. I think I was surprised. I thought he would go earlier. I was surprised, but I'm with you on that point. Former South Carolina and Memphis running back Mario Anderson Jr. signs with the Rams. Kyron Williams would like you to know that he intends to hold on to that job, but is it possible that Anderson is a sleeper even with Blake Corum floating around?
Absolutely. And the reason being is that Mario Anderson is one of those players that truly slipped through the cracks in the draft. He was at Newberry College. I think it was Newberry. Was it Newberry or was it? It's the other one that I always – the one where Chris Warren went to that I can't remember. It's in South Carolina. But he's he went to South Carolina. He played at Memphis. He's got better speed than what I think people realize. He's a tough runner, physical after contact, good movement, catches the ball well. In a way, if he was faster, if he had like Ashton Ginty's speed, he'd also be like D'Angelo Williams as a comp. He's kind of that short build with the low center of gravity. But I would say he's probably a little better than what another Anderson was, who also played for the played for the Rams. He's a little bit of a bowling ball in that respect. Right. But he's also built CJ. But he's also
rolled
built
off the couch and delivered.
Exactly. But all those backs are that way. They have a type. Sean McVay has a type, and that type, you look at Williams, he's built that way. So's Blake Corum. So he fits what they look for in a back, and they've had success with late round guys. Now, Anderson obviously is a guy you're just going to monitor, kind of like Christopher Brooks, or and wait and see if an opportunity can arise here. But he's a player on deep rosters that maybe if you have a practice squad spot for, somebody gets hurt, you're going to want to remember his name because he was someone that I think in other drafts, if the strengths and weaknesses of different positions were different and entering this draft, or he was in a class that wasn't so strong at running back, he'd probably be a 5th or 6th round pick. He has that kind of skill. So very reliable ball carrier too in terms of holding on to the football. So he's from Limestone College. I think that's.
I thought it was Newberry. I looked it up.
It was Newberry. It was Newberry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I got it confused with Trey Stewart, who was from Limestone College. Maybe that's what it was, but we'll see. And Warren was from Ferrum, so I screwed that whole thing. I screwed that whole pooch up. That's why I don't do bio work, folks. I just look at the field stuff. All right.
All right, let's move on. Brett Veach would like you to know that running backs can be found in the 7th round. Isaiah Pacheco agrees with him. Will Breshard Smith, the SMU running back they selected in Kansas City with the 7th pick in this year's draft, be somebody we need to watch?
2 words. Fuck yes. Breshard Smith is going to be a lot higher on my board than what his round designation would lead you to believe. Because he's going to get to also work behind 2 really accomplished runners. One of them being a late round guy as inspiration and one being Kareem Hunt. He's going to get a chance to see how it's supposed to be done. And he's, even after 1 year as a starter, converting from wide receiver at Miami, he looked really refined for a first-year guy, like more refined than what I remember seeing from Tyrone Tracy at Purdue in his final year. So, and he can catch the ball well, which is different than what people assume from Tyrone Tracy. Like I would say Tyrone Tracy, if he came to the NFL as a receiver, he would not have made a team. If Savion Williams comes to the NFL as a receiver, he may actually wind up being a starter. Jordan, our guy Breshard Smith, he might have been an end of a roster receiver, but I bet he would have made an active roster or at least been on a practice squad and put on an active roster soon enough as a receiver. So this is a kid who's explosive, shifty, very good back, who I thought had a chance to develop into a starter. And in Kansas City, it's a really nice get because Kareem Hunt's going to be gone next year, and Pacheco only has has a year left, and we'll see if they extend it. It depends on how Smith
added Elijah
looks.
Mitchell. They added Elijah Mitchell, so he is there as well.
He'll have 2 good games and then get hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
I think right now Isaiah Pacheco is going as running back 35 or has been prior to the draft. I think it's worthwhile taking a chance on him as your 3rd or 4th running back. That's how you build your roster, in hopes that it's kind of like a Tony Pollard situation or other players we've seen where it takes a full year to come back from an injury. I mean, he underwent the same procedure as Pollard. Pollard needed until week 10 the next year after injuring himself in the playoffs. So, thinking Isaiah Pacheco could return to form isn't a bad bet in best balls. And we'll see. Maybe we'll have more information on all these guys before. But again, the Kansas City's history of success with running backs is undeniable.
And platooning them and platooning young guys to see what they have. And look at Carson Steele. He got platooned.
Right.
This dude is better than Carson Steele.
In Chicago, I feel like there's a number of drafts where we feel like, oh wow, somebody's going to come in and usurp it. We kind of thought DeAndre Swift was persona non grata. The Lions moved on from him quickly after Ben Johnson's first season as play caller there. Maybe they're just, this isn't a good fit. And then they waited till the 7th round to grab a running back. We'll talk about that. But first, I think people should be mindful that J.K. Dobbins and Nick Chubb are still floating around out there. Would they be good fits for this Ben Johnson offense, whether it's working with DeAndre Swift or with someone else?
Absolutely, because J.K. Dobbins could be DeAndre Swift and David Montgomery combined when healthy. So you could give that, or you could just put him in one or the other role and probably get really strong play out of him if you're worried about how much workload. But I would say I wouldn't be too worried about it. I think Dobbins is still good to go. Nick Chubb there's a lot of questions about whether he's the athlete that he was. And I think that there's enough. We didn't see enough to be completely sure one way or the other. Though most people will just paint it as it's over for him. But I think with Chubb, if the Bears work him out and say let's put him in a Montgomery-esque role, that could be a really great thing for this team, at least on a 1 year or a 2 year deal. And with either one of these backs, I would consider that.
Right. The guy we've talked about in this program, Kyle Monangai from Rutgers, 5'8", 211, kind of a bowling ball guy. Does he have a chance? They picked him in the 7th round in Chicago. Does he have a chance to carve out a role here?
Oh, he absolutely does, because he runs with better vision than I think Rashawn Johnson or DeAndre Swift. And while he hasn't shown a lot as a pass catcher, we didn't get to see that a lot based on the way he was used in the scheme. He's a load carrier. He can pass protect. He accelerates in the contact. He's a finisher. He's one of those guys that will, he can win on volume, and he'll hit you a lot of doubles, as a runner. I like him a lot. I thought he was underrated as a back, but the lack of opportunities to see him really as a pass catcher, and the things that I did see didn't give me enough to say he's good at it. But if he does show he's good at it, he'd be up there among the top 15 backs in this class easily, and a guy who could start for a team. Honestly, you look at that draft, and I haven't seen the videos myself, but I've seen a lot of people comment about the look that Ben Johnson shot Ryan Poles when Ryan Poles said, well, we just kept missing opportunities to get what we were looking for. And, so I think Ben Johnson definitely was given the part of his job was probably the ownership and the GM agreeing that he's going to get his toys early, and then they'll take over for the defensive side of the ball later. And that's why the Bears draft looks so uneven, probably, in terms of quality of what they did, at least on paper. And I think that Ben probably wanted one more toy, and Ryan was stingy with taking back the controls. But it's okay, because Ryan will be gone next year. The Bears offense will look really good this year and promising. And they'll get a coach. They'll probably get a GM who Ben Johnson gets to sign off on.
I feel like this one is I think our emotions are going to get caught up in this one, because after weeks of thinking Omarion Hampton is going to go at number 20 to the Denver Broncos and be a thunderous lead back, or maybe Travion Henderson. The Denver Broncos did not pick him back in the first round. They waited till round 2 and got University of Central Florida running back RJ Harvey. Not a huge guy. And he joins Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, Tyler Matty, Blake Watson in the backfield. I did a draft yesterday where I want to say it was before the end of the 3rd round. He was definitely in starter, well in running back 2 territory. Are we getting a little ahead of ourselves with RJ Harvey? Feel it or fuck it?
I'm going to say feel it. We are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. He's going to definitely rise up my board.
Sure.
Because I had him rated pretty low compared to everybody else. I think everybody else is a little bit seduced by his speed and quickness, which is really good. He can catch. I like his ability to catch the ball. And he's a good zone runner, but he's not a great gap runner yet, which is kind of funny. But I think it's going to be reasonably easy for him to correct these things. So I like the idea that Sean Payton is, maybe it's a bit of a projection pick, but he's been good at picking running backs. And I remember a running back he had who apparently in camp, he didn't really like the kid. He looked at him the way I did, which was, this kid bounces everything unnecessarily, he cuts back everything that he shouldn't cut back, and he can't hold on to the football worth a flip. But man, when he does those two things on occasion, he looks really good. And after getting yelled at, I think once for bouncing a play outside, Alvin Kamara didn't do it again, and pretty much showed everybody that maybe, the ability was there. Maybe he was overthinking some things, and it clicked into place, and he's literally one of the great backs of this generation. So maybe R.J. Harvey gets a chance to be that guy and they strike gold again. But I'm more of the belief that Sean Payton probably didn't like that guy, and Alvin Kamara was the exception to the rule. So I'm open to R.J. Harvey if he falls to me, say, as a third or fourth round guy. But there's people who are saying he's my number 3 back on my board. Right. I've
seen that.
I think Debro was one of them.
Debro was one of them.
Yeah.
I think. Look, I was intrigued by what George Payton said. Well, I'm a cat guy, so when he said he's been our pet cat through this whole draft, I said, okay, well, I like that. But also talked about the home run hitting ability, the runs of 10 yards or more, the explosive plays. But I do, I'm not forgetting. I think in that same draft I mentioned yesterday where Harvey went in the 3rd round, I'm going to double check that. I took Audric Estime in the 14th. Right, yeah. Just because I think there is going to be maybe a need for a short yardage player there, or
a finisher, or the fact that Sean Payton has been infamous for having 3 running backs work at once, even when he had Mark Ingram and Pierre Thomas and Chris Ivory, and he's always picked a few, and he likes open competition. And last year he said that Blake Watson reminded them of Alvin Kamara, and Jaleel McLaughlin certainly can break a lot of big runs. So I get that the draft capital forces you to pay more attention, but I would also say that he went to a coach who said, I don't give a fuck about draft capital. We're going to let them compete. And that means that Sean Payton's going to be hard on this dude's ass. And if he thinks he's going to out-athlete people at every turn and not be disciplined, his draft capital won't matter. So it increases value, but I would say, our buddy Derek Brown, I would say, who does fine work. I would just say that, maybe in this case, I feel like he's a little more excited than some.
I think there's always exuberance at great landing spots, right?
Yes.
Or what we perceive to be landing spots, and we'll see how it plays out. Another guy I thought, I wondered about the landing spot. Not really about the player. Luther Burden III, who goes to the Chicago Bears in the 2nd round, but I feel he's totally overrated, Matt. Feel that or fuck it.
Bob Harris baiting me. I got a table saw for you that has part of a finger in it after this weekend.
All right.
Yeah. But no, Luther Burden. I honestly, this is just one of those things that I may be wrong about it, but I can say with pride that when everybody said A.J. Brown had a horrible fit, or Justin Jefferson had a horrible fit, or that Lad McConkey, no way in hell he'd be a top 15 redraft player as a rookie. Your boy right here is basically was the guy to say, no, those guys might have the best fits in each of those situations. So when I see Luther Burden here and people go, too many mouths to feed, it's the same thing I heard with all these other players. Or he's in the slot, and the slot's not a great spot. Yeah, it is in a spread offense, or even an offense that is going to run more 2 tight end looks. Well, why is that? Because if you look at Ben Johnson's scheme with 2 tight ends, who seemed to get the ball an awful lot, even with an offense that ran a lot of those. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's more of a slot receiver who can play outside. Luther Burden is probably if you ask me, he's a more athletically skilled version of Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's going to replace Keenan Allen in that slot role. They're probably going to use him in the backfield more often as a runner because he's so skilled with the ball in his hands. And they can move him outside when they need to. It would not shock me in the very least if in 2 wide receiver sets we see Luther Burden as one of those 2 wide receivers over either Rome Odunze or DJ Moore. Now, mind you, DJ Moore has only got 1 year left on his deal, and he's a fine player. He also did not look good last year when they put him in a spot that he wasn't ideally suited for. They put him more as a split end. He needed to be the flanker. When they did that and fixed things and gave him a specific routes to run where the route depths weren't crazy, in terms of what he did. He was a little unpredictable with the route depths he gave. He played better, when they kind of did the triage of this offense. But also, he and Cole Kmet both got extensions, and then
right.
and
significant extension,
and then complained to the media about everything. And being on the Bears podcast that I was, the TTNL network, the Tape Never Lies network, with Phil Otoshian and Shane Marsaw, both, they talked about this may also be a message from Ben Johnson to those two guys, Cole Kmet and DJ Moore, that we can replace your ass, and I think that, they're gonna. This offense is going to be very dynamic this year, and I would not be surprised if if Luther Burden takes on a bigger chunk of that than people expect as a rookie. So I'm excited. I think he's the top receiver to pick in dynasty leagues. Hasn't changed my mind from the landing spot. In fact, it's emboldened me.
All right, Colson Loveland might have been another part of that message to Cole Kmet. And pick overall.
Huge.
In Kansas City, we've got Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster all in place. Still, the Chiefs drafted Jalen Royals out of Utah State in the 4th round. Is he underrated, field or fuck?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Because here's the thing. When you look at injuries with players, when there's established procedures that we see success rates with, and they become common to do these types of procedures, we feel a little bit better about that player returning to their form. When you look at Rashee Rice, co-host Brandon Angelo on our Going Deep podcast, who, does work with guys who are rehabbing, he said this is going to be a much more difficult injury than people are saying. And he may not have back the athletic ability that he once had. And it's going to take a while, he may not have it. Now, mind you, people might go, well, we hear all sorts of things from different trainers. Well, this time last year, when people were saying that the Michael Penix pick was the dumbest thing ever and that Kirk Cousins was going to be ready to go, and yeah, Kirk Cousins was quote-unquote ready to go, so much so that the Falcons had to overprotect him, and he couldn't throw the ball with any velocity because guess why? That Achilles wasn't fully healed. And he couldn't fully, he was just on the field, and they trusted his acumen as a decision maker. But he was not the pre-injury Kirk Cousins, and and Brandon was right about that. And this time, last year during the season when that injury happened and we found out what it was, he said, Rashee Rice might not ever be the same player again. And when you look at Jalen Royals, what he does best is what Rashee Rice does best. And right. I would argue he's almost as good with the ball in the air as a contested catch guy. But you want to put him – Rashee Rice was what they hoped Sky Moore would be. And I think Jalen Royals, you could say the same thing. So he's a sneaky good addition.
All right, fair enough. Harold Fannin Jr. goes to the Cleveland Browns, where David Njoku would like you to know he is the tight end of record there. But Fannin, it was 3rd-round pick, elite producer in college, and also very versatile. Can probably move around a little bit and play some various spots. Is he an underrated asset, fielder bucket?
Yes, this is going to be so fun because our buddy Alfredo Brown, I was on with him after you left on our draft party, and he felt like, ooh, this is going to sink his value. And, and I can see that early on. If you're thinking with a redraft mentality, it does sink his value, and I think that's where Alfredo was coming from. But from a dynasty perspective, David Njoku's contract is up at the end of this year. Also, Kevin Stefanski is going back to his old offense, which is a lot of 2 tight end sets. And Njoku, while he's very athletic, what he does best is run crossing routes and seam routes and over routes, straight line routes that don't break back to the quarterback. He's not a top route runner. He's just more of an athlete who runs across the field and can win the ball. But and when he gets ahead of steam, he's certainly agile, can leap over people. He's not a stop-start cutting back. He's more of a linear. He's like a high-end, high-functioning linear player who has that type of athletic ability, which is good. We saw how good he can be, and if Flacco's starting, which is likely he will, he'll probably be his security blanket once again. But Harold Fannin is more Sam Laporta. He can win routes against defenders of any size, and he can do that as a detached receiver. So you can make him your number 3 receiver in 11 personnel sets. He has got that stop-start quickness. He has excellent hands. He can go up, win the ball, and he's even more dynamic after the catch. So to me, it's going to be easier for them to replace Njoku if Fannin hits the way that I would expect that he can, because they just need more of a blocker. They'll get a Brock Wright type, in Ben Johnson's scheme and with the Lions, or a Cole Kmet type, and they don't have to overuse him as a receiver, and they can let Fannin be the main guy moving forward. So if I'm betting in a 1.5 PPR league on a tight end, I would say Fannin. The first 3 are Colston Loveland, Mason Taylor, and then Harold Fannin. And I would probably even consider Fannin over Taylor if it weren't for the fact
you're
that
leaving Tyler Warren out on purpose.
Warren's number 4. I'm good with that.
Okay.
I'm good with him too. But I'm just thinking like where I have my first 3. So Warren.
No, that's
Warren
fair.
fits.
That's why I want to check.
Yeah, Warren's good too. And the Colts got who they thought they got. My buddy Chad Ryder, we've joked around this weekend, about Warren, because he likes Warren more than I do. And he said something about, well, if they get the next Gronkowski, I'll be talking to you. And I said, yep, and I'll give you all the love that you deserve for seeing him as the next Gronkowski. But I ain't seen it.
Sometimes you just have to let somebody else be the hero if it works out, and stand by your guns, right?
That's right. That's right.
I mentioned the league I'm in where we draft quarterback. We draft our rookies before the NFL draft. Missed out on Milroe. Got Tyler Shough in the 2nd round, and it's a super flex. And I also have Derek Carr, so this couldn't have worked out better for me. Shough lands with the 40th pick. It's the highest the Saints have taken a quarterback since, I don't know, Archie Manning. So clearly they have some interest. He's an older guy, going to turn 26. Big arm, big body, mobile. Kellen Moore seems to like him. Why am I getting carried away here, Matt? Help me.
Think Jay Cutler circa Chicago. Okay, it could be really good. It can be really bad.
Light a smoke up for him. Man.
Yeah, it could. And he's in the wildest town in the South, so he has a chance to. There's wild things going on in that place. But look, he's got the weapons, and he's
right
around him. He could be a big play quarterback for you. I just see him as, there's more of a chance that he's Jameis, good and bad.
I'll take it.
Than he is Matt Stafford.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
If Jameis is the high end of the outcomes, perfectly fine with that in fantasy.
Yes.
Don't know that the Saints will be okay with it.
Yeah.
But I will.
So short term, I would say if you took him, think of him as a short term option who, after if he has a strong half of the season, you might want to see if you can deal upward and deal out on him and sell high. I would say long term, that's probably the profile to look at, because he's not gonna, the pocket stuff is concerning for me. But if he can overcome that, he might be good Jay Cutler, and that means that he's, upper middle class Matthew Stafford, which could be good.
Take that.
Yeah,
we'll take that. Omarion Hampton lands with the Chargers. Like, again, we all thought that he was going to go like 20, to Denver. I think the Chargers thought this as well. And this was just a case of, oh, wow, look what we found at 22. Najee Harris, sorry. This is not going to bode well for you, sir, in your 5.3-year, $1 million contract. But is Hampton all that much of a threat to him?
He's a threat to split time. He's not a threat to take away all the time. I know that, Matt Patanti at Football Guys, our esteemed lineman writer, he tends to like to, I know one thing that he has a tendency for as an analyst that I think is valuable is to talk about well, maybe this is a sign that Najee Harris is damaged goods, and that's why they drafted this guy. And there's certainly reasons why that could be the case. But I think that from what we've seen with Najee Harris, he hasn't had major injury.
Right.
He's just been a grinder on a team that didn't have a very strong offensive line.
Right, and lousy quarterbacks.
And I think Harbaugh's probably looked at Hassan Haskins, and while he had that, Harbaugh strikes me as the less savvy brother of John Harbaugh, okay? And I love to say this from a sibling rivalry standpoint, because Jim gets more of
John might see it the same way.
I think John does too, but I think that the public sees Jim as the headliner.
Right.
Jim's like the guy. He's got the pedigree, all that stuff. But Jim talks about chickens being nervous birds and why he didn't eat them. Now he's changed his mind on that. And then you look at him in San Francisco, and yeah, they got to a Super Bowl. But do you remember some of the draft picks that he's had early? They sucked. They weren't that great. And people want to blame Trent Baalke. But the past 2 years of looking at his draft picks, they did good on Ladd. But the rest of those picks weren't all that strong. I don't think that Jim has a very good voice in terms of what he delivers from the draft. I don't think he's very good at the draft game. Whereas I think John either knows to step out of the way in Baltimore or has voiced what he's looking for and is good with it. I think Jim's a little meddlesome. And I think that Jim's going to over-meddle with this team. And I think what happened is he probably was almost orgasmic about getting Hassan what was his name? Hassan Haskins,
yes.
Off waivers, and thought, I'm going to have this big, bulky team. And, I'll settle for J.K. Dobbins, who played well, but they shuttled him off. The Kamani Vidal pick was, we'll see what happens there, but he's more of a scat pack type of player, which wasn't really what he likes. He got Gus. He probably wanted Gus, in that range. And so to me, you're getting kind of a Gus Edwards and Omarion Hampton, which is good, but I don't think Omarion Hampton is more Gus than he is, Joe Mixon. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we'll see how it plays out. Every time I hear Kamani Vidal, I think back to a guest I had on the Sirius XM show. Joe Reedy is a regular on the program, the Associated Press writer who covers the Chargers, and everyone was super enthusiastic about Kamani Vidal. I'm using this not about Vidal, but bigger picture about running backs who go late that we get excited about. And so the guy that covers the team on a daily basis as we go through the mini camps, he'll go, so how about this Kamani Vidal? Right? And he's kind of like, he'll be a great special teams player. And I mean, yeah. I think a lot of times that's, I think that's probably the correct response for a lot of these guys. Not Omarion Hampton, who will have a frontline role, but I'm with you. I think this will be more of a share, at least initially, and I'm a little lower on him than the world in that post-draft we ran at Sirius yesterday. He went a little earlier than I would have taken him, and I think I got Quinshon Judkins after him,
nice pick.
Suited me nicely. Right. N'Keal Harry says the Patriots aren't great at evaluating wide receivers. They drafted another one, Kyle Williams. Is he overrated, Matt? Feel it or fuck it.
Remember Tyquan Thornton?
Vaguely.
Yeah. Well,
I do remember. I'm going to be honest with full disclosure, because I never release wide receivers from my deep dynasty leagues. He's probably on at least 3 of my rosters.
There you go. Well, I think that Kyle Williams is kind of that Tyquan Thornton thing, that the Tyquan Thornton, Devontae Parker, the what we're seeing here is that Mike Vrabel may have had a good experience getting A.J. Brown, but the Patriots, the way they operate the draft, seems to be the same from the Belichick era. Now, maybe Kyle Williams will be the one to prove it wrong, but I'm waiting for proof before I jump on board, because what I saw on tape with Kyle Williams is tremendous speed, excellent skill after the catch, could make a dynamite punt returner, can be a good RPO type of player too, and he will get behind defenders, but he's got to freaking catch the ball better. He's got to use better technique, and there's a lot of fighting the football with him. And in a league where the corners are better in tight coverage, track the ball faster, get their hands in the right position better, know the little pressure points to hit knock a defense, to disrupt a receiver, I think Kyle Williams is going to struggle, and I'm convinced. I'm not convinced that the Patriots have moved on from their wide receiver woes.
I'm not either. And like there's talk they're ready to move on from Kayshon Boutte. I'm thinking, really, he looked like he showed signs of life at least. So I don't know. We'll see what happens there. Shedeur Sanders, let's go ahead and touch on it. Not that everyone already hasn't heard enough about this over the course of the weekend. Anyone who watched draft coverage has probably heard this name more than they like. Matt, his dad was the reason he fell past the first or third round. Feel it or fuck it.
Oh, I absolutely feel that 100%. I would say if you're going to say why he fell past the first round, I would say it's that he didn't have top-end athletic ability or a top-end arm, something that was really special about him athletically. The reason that I would say that he would have fallen past the second round is a combination of what I just said, and to some degree, the fact that studies have shown over the years that black quarterbacks tend to get benched earlier. They tend to fall in the draft more often. They tend to not get jobs again, second chance opportunities again, and that there's sometimes unintentional bias that can come through based on studies that you can see that happen in America. Okay, how much of that? I would say a smaller percentage of that would be that, but there's a little bit of that going on.
I think it's interesting, but I mean, like, clearly all the big name analysts were told he was something or he was going in a range that he didn't end up going. And so they were all trying to cover their ass on that end. And the reporting that came out just before the draft, Tom Pelissero's anonymous quotes, which, by the way, jibed with some that you saw from Josina Anderson at the Combine, that he didn't come off well at his interviews, things like that. I get all that. At some point, everyone, I'm sure the NFL drafts like I draft in fantasy, everyone at the right price I will take. I feel like somebody got a great value here. I just want to say, looking at the way he handled the public face of this, for every time I saw him during the draft or they showed him, he was super positive, taking everything in stride, didn't seem to have any issues, wasn't bitching and moaning, honestly, I thought as he was handling this, I'm going, well, this is, I'm sure teams saw something else, but what I'm seeing is the opposite of what was reported.
Yes, and it's a great point, because what I was hearing from people who don't talk to media whose job is to say everything that is told to them, and and I'm sure that a lot of front-facing media that you talked about know a lot more beneath the surface and are allowed to share certain things, but they're often used still as a used by people pre-draft to share certain things. When we get anonymous scout talk, usually like we did last week and talked about the quarterbacks or I did that on the show with Brandon, where we talked about people who said anonymous scouts said Jalen Hurts would be a problem in the locker room because he didn't have leadership qualities in the locker room. Hearing that was crazy. Or that Lamar Jackson definitely wasn't a quarterback. Right. Or Patrick Mahomes, if Brett Favre threw two passes every game that you're just scratching your head going, what the fuck? Patrick Mahomes was going to throw 20. These are things that were said by anonymous scouts. So there's that. But the people who talked to people I was hearing, stuff from, he was good in the interviews. He was a poised kid. And what you heard is the point I'm about to make. And I have a little bit of experience with this. Not directly one-to-one, but I'll just put it this way. His dad is a narcissist. His dad is a great coach, a great football player, did some wonderful things, at least on the front end, to get HBCUs in the spotlight, and to get talent in the spotlight from the HBCUs, all of that. But he's also a narcissist. And it's pretty clear to see that he has narcissistic behaviors. And I think he really wanted to help out his son. And I think he really wanted to do well for his son. But I also think that he unintentionally screwed this up for his son. Because by all accounts of people who did talk with and know about Shedeur personally, they're like, he's been in the limelight and dealing with a dad who seeks the limelight all his life, and he's good at being able to handle things like a pro in a way that a lot of young players don't get exposure to. So he's seasoned in that way. He's not going to be fazed by anything that happens in a locker room or dealing with people. So then why did he fall past the third round? And the reason is this. Most teams, when they have a player who has parents who are troublesome, parents who are possibly going to play Little League mom or Little League dad at the pro level, that scares them because they have...
Or possibly going to want your job if you're the coach.
And then there's players... Yes, we're not even going to get there. You're getting ahead, Bob. Because, see, here's the thing. There are players who have these kinds of things going on, and they have moms and dads or uncles coming up to the facility and bugging operations staff who are just there to like handle the day-to-day business of the facility or the team. They aren't related to like, they're not working with the players. They're just trying to like set up travel or deal with ticket sales or handle marketing or do these things. And you get parents coming in disrupting the office environment, dealing with crazy shit. And this is what teams want to avoid. They're trying to avoid the players who have parents who are going to create this kind of drama or force players to have to take time off because now they have a crazy emergency in their life because someone's about to go homeless or some crazy things are happening. So, and none of that's in the media. But you've got Deion Sanders, who at any moment can say, I'd like to call a press conference, and every major media person will be there, and he will have the ear of every outlet, and he has the influence of owners like you just said. And that's what they're afraid of, is that Deion's going to create a big mess. This
is the thing. This reminds me of a Tim Tebow-like situation. If you're going to invite the clown car, the media clown car in, the driver needs to be really good. And, there are players who are worth it. Antonio Brown at points was worth the circus that came to town with him.
Temporarily.
That he wasn't. And where is he now? He's out on my X feed saying all kind of crazy stuff. So, and I think it's the same kind of situation. I thought about it when the Jets brought Tebow in. I just thought, man, you're just inviting a vast, media crap fest, right? It's just going to go nuts. And I think that's the thing, though. Like, if a player's good enough, they will put up with the media, the dad, the whatever. And I feel like he just didn't hit that bar. That does not mean he can't be a very good player. And I hope, like, honestly, at this point, after enduring all the chatter over the course of 3 days, I would love to see him make everyone look stupid.
I would love as a Cleveland Browns fan, I would love to see him do well. And I think that he was a solid quarterback that the way the NFL usually thinks, I would have expected him to be a second-round player. The way I think, I would have seen him as a third-round player and who could potentially become a good starter. And I think that that's the case. But and I know, I only know so much about the inner workings of this stuff, but I would say that if his father really is kind of narcissistic in this fashion, he's had to spend his life basically pleasing his dad and doing things to kind of like know how to handle it, manage his dad. He manages his dad more than his dad manages him. Trust me on that scenario. And I would say that probably down the line, we may see in the next 10 years him talking about how he had to distance himself a bit from his dad on a professional level. And that's when he really found himself and his ability to play. And
you say a narcissist is like a bad thing. Come on, man.
Well, hey, I don't know what to tell you. I think you're taking it a little personally. I don't know why, and you're not a narcissist, but that I know of, But no, seriously, Shedeur is just, his dad thought he was doing the right thing. Even if his dad's a narcissist, he thought he may have made this about him, but he really thought, let me try and steer things and use my influence to help my son get the very best he can get. But, retiring numbers that shouldn't be retired, unretiring numbers that shouldn't be unretired, and retiring numbers that should be retired, the way that he dealt with people who aren't important to him, the way that he talked publicly about teams that they don't want him playing for. I know the Mannings there were things with the Mannings, but that got leaked more than it was Deion just outright saying it. So there shouldn't be much of a difference, but unfortunately in the world there can be. But Shedeur as a player, that if they can keep the interference of Deion from being a problem and he keeps his mouth shut, I think he'll be fine. But I would have preferred to see him on a team like backing up Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson or any quarterback beyond reproach. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, somebody where you could trade him out a second contract deal where Deion couldn't come in and start doing what he's going to do in Cleveland and make this a mess.
Man, I don't know where this Joe Flacco slander is coming from, sir. He is clearly the locked-in starter and unassailable in that role.
Well, he's a former Raven, so he'll tell Deion to shut the fuck up.
As long as he plays like he did down the stretch 2 years ago, he can do no wrong, and he will serve our fantasy fortunes well. All right, everybody, go to mattwaldman.com. Get your RSP if you haven't already. Expect your post-draft portion of this to be out Saturday. Maybe sooner. I'm not saying. I'm just saying.
Maybe.
I'm not saying. And we'll be back next week to do the same thing again. Check out My Work in Football, guys. My fantasy notebook is out with a lot of talk about this, about the draft and the landing spots in particular. So enjoy that, and I'll be on the hot seat as well. So we'll talk to you soon. Love you, Matt. Bye.
Love you, Bob.